today on Coder Conversations is Kaleb Ridgeway, former multimedia journalist at NBC News. I'm your host, Kevin.
And I'm your co-host, Brian.
You're now tuned in to Coder Conversations. Welcome to the show, Caleb.
Hey, thank you guys. I really appreciate you having me.
Oh, most definitely, man. Thanks for coming on tonight.
Of course, of course.
Yeah, it's definitely a pleasure, man. So I know you've worked at a journalist at NBC, but now you're doing work as a substitute teacher. So do you mind like starting off with your journalist career, and then we can switch over to your current teaching career?
Sure. Yeah. So right before I graduated high school, not high school, but excuse me, college, um, the semester before my last fall semester, uh, the news director for the station that I was working at, she was a visiting professor. And so she was just doing a couple of classes throughout the week while they were trying to find a full-time replacement. And so my university, we have a student-run news broadcast every Friday. And so she had came to our last or second to last show to kind of do some recruiting. And she said that she was interested in seniors. And of course, she gave all of us her card, but I was going to follow it up seriously because I graduated that coming fall in December. And I was like, oh yeah, this would be great. And so actually, before I even reached out to the station, a guy that graduated the year before me, I think, he worked there as like a sports anchor. And so he had messaged me on Facebook and he was like, hey, Whitney's asking about you. Would you want a job? And I was like, yeah, of course. It was the summer right before I graduated. And I was like, yeah, I mean, not
Hell yeah.
hired right before,
Yeah, bring me on.
Yeah. And so I was doing that for full time from the summer of 2022 until summer 2025. And it was a whirlwind every day. I mean, we always were doing something different. I had a different story to do every day. And through that, I made a lot of cool connections with people. I still have everybody's phone number. I have, mayors and
Wow.
And county judge executives, and I have some police chiefs and, sheriffs. And I have all kinds of people from the surrounding area just saved under various things, their positions. It was really cool because, you get to do things and meet people that, you regularly wouldn't meet, right? I mean, I've interviewed the governor. I live here in Kentucky, so
Okay.
I've interviewed the governor of Kentucky multiple times. A lot of business owners are moving into the area, CEOs and stuff like that. And it's just been so cool because, a lot of people, when you think about the news, you always go to like national news immediately. But if you're fortunate enough for your city or whatever to have like a local news outlet, it's really cool because, everything that happens in Washington and all that kind of stuff, I mean, that's going to take a while to get to you, right? But the things that affect you, right here and right now are what happens at your in your mayor's office, in your county, judge executive or your county mayor's office, the public works department. They handle the roads and everything. And so,
Right.
What's happening in local government, regional government, and just in your backyard is really important. I did a series one summer as school was about to wind down. I thought to myself, I know a lot of people for summer break, they're looking to do things, but maybe not everybody has the money to do that. And so I had to start a staycation series. And I was like, okay, what can you do, just in the viewing area of where my station is, right? And so I wanted to let people know, like, hey, you don't have to go all the way to Disney World or spend thousands of dollars going to, Yellowstone, to have fun. So I reached out to all like the county and city like tourism departments, and I was just like, hey, give me a quick tour of the city/county. I'd like to have maybe 3 or 4 things that you can do within a day or two, and then put it on TV. And so I finished almost every county But I just thought, it was cool, like, to show like, hey guys, these are things in your backyard that you can still do for fun, and you only have to drive maybe an hour away from your house. I've done some really cool public service things. The city that I live in here in Bowling Green, it's really unique that they don't have like a regular like storm sewage structure. Like there's no drains that have pipes that carry the rainwater to the river like the Ohio or something like
Oh, wow.
that. Bowling Green sits on top of a big cave system. So what they've done for the last couple hundred years is just make injection wells. They just take a metal pipe, stick it into the ground, and when it rains, it drains into the pipe and it goes into the cave, and then the water naturally moves from the cave to the river. Well, over the last couple hundred years, a lot of people have built things on top of surfaces, and there's not a whole lot of places for the water to drain. And everybody knows that storms are getting more intense with all the climate change and stuff like that. So Bowling Green actually flooded really bad in the spring of 2025, and that kind of alerted the public to like, hey, like I'm noticing that the flooding is getting worse and worse every time it rains. And so I just so happened to come across this story, and the public works department was asking the city for more money to figure out some sort of way to set up drainage structures so that every time it rains 5, 6, 7 inches, Bowling Green's not getting washed out, and we're spending hundreds of thousands of taxpayer dollars to fix all these problems. If we just had a regular storm drain, we wouldn't have to worry about that kind of thing. I've done a couple of murder trials. It's been a lot of fun. There's anything that you think that I could cover, I've definitely covered. Education, crime, new businesses into the area, some political stuff. It definitely is like a life that most people don't get to live, and it's not just a job; it's really a lifestyle.
So like, what do you do on a day-to-day basis on that job, and what are some of the more interesting stories that you've covered?
Yeah. So like, day to day, it looks like just, ideally you want to be ahead, right? Because
Right.
the new story to uncover every day. So I, try to set up contact with people ahead of time. And, I just go out with my camera, and, we do an interview. I do my own shots. I do all my own editing. The thing about the news is that it's kind of like it's like a tiered system, right? So like in America, there's 213, I believe, news markets. Number 1 is New York. Number 2 is LA, of course. I think number 4 is Detroit. And number 5 might be Chicago. So the bigger the area, the more people that are watching, that's the higher your market. And so, with my area being a lower market, we do a lot of local news, and we try to focus on, and if there is some sort of national headline, we try to filter it down to the local level to make it relatable to, but every day is different, but it's the same framework. You turn in 1 or 2 stories, you do your own interviews, your own editing. Like I said, because it's a smaller station, so I was kind of a one-man band doing that. But I think, like I said, my most interesting would probably be the public works story that I was just talking about, because, any other city in America, whenever it rains, you have pipes and drains that carry the water out, right? A lot of cities don't have a lot of flash flooding problems in the way that Bowling Green, Kentucky would have problems, because that storm in particular, it rained like 10 inches in like 5 hours.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And so because Bowling Green relies on cave systems and everything up top is always changing, that means the way that the water is going to get to the, underground is going to change too. And so, because maybe you had like a plain field. Well, now in the last couple of years, Walmart and some other companies wanted to build on that field. Now you have all this open land that was taking in water is covered up.
Oh, wow.
You can't go down there anymore. So, water has to look for a different place
Yeah.
to go into the ground. And then, people litter and everything. And so, depending on what's happening above ground changes what happens below ground. If you happen to throw away like a tire or something, and the tire ends up falling down a drain pipe or like a hole or something, and it blocks a cave passageway, well, then now it restricts the water flow, and you have to just wait for that tire to just either deteriorate or move through, because a lot of the caves under Bowling Green are not big enough for people to walk through. So when I was doing my walkthrough last year with the Public Works Department, they were showing me that like these passages, we can't get down here. Like we're so far from the surface where we entered, we can't get down here and clean this stuff. It would take forever to do that. So
Yeah.
we just have to wait for the water to just work its way through. I think another interesting story that I did was there was a man, well, I say a young man, he had just graduated high school, named Ernesto, and he was detained by ICE last year over this. Like he had just graduated, like it was like 3 weeks, and then they did a targeted operation here in Bowling Green, and ICE actually had detained him, and it was crazy. And a lot of the Bowling Green community came out and did a protest on one of the main stretches, and I went out there with a camera guy, and we just went around and interviewed. And it was one of the, it felt cool to me because it was one of those few rare moments where national news kind of comes to your hometown or your backyard, I guess. And I was walking around, interviewing people as my camera guy was, in the background, just kind of filming us. And it was like what you would see on like national TV, like on CNN or NBC or something like that. It was really cool. But yeah, I think those would probably have to be like the highlights of my 3-year career. And the thing about news is like, you always feel like you're making a difference, right? You always want to feel like what you're spending time on recording actually matters to the people. And, something that always matters is definitely money. And then people always want to know about crime or, who's getting arrested, that kind of thing. And so with ICE being a big law enforcement conversation in the country right now, things about immigration over the past year have definitely been really, really hot. Excuse me, let me plug in my laptop real fast.
Oh, no problem.
Okay, all good.
So yeah, what did you want to ask something, Brian?
I was just going to say, do you prefer the one-man shop kind of setup, or do you prefer working on a team?
Working on a team's always best, just because, I mean, once when you're your own production and everything, you get really good at, managing your time, looking for, the shots that look well, that kind of thing. You almost feel like, well, I would get it done faster if I was just by myself. But at the same time, you have more restrictions, right? I mean, because you can't do everything yourself, right? There's some shots that you just can't get because you have to hold the camera, right? And
Sure.
so, if you have somebody with you, you can do more things where like you kind of walk and talk with the person you're interviewing, or they can get some cool over the shoulder shots of you, talking to the person. It allows you to be a lot more dynamic if you have another person with you. But also there is some pride in like doing it all by yourself and then getting back to the station, you're editing it and you're like, man, like I nailed it. You know what I mean?
I
Like,
killed it. Yeah.
this is a really good shot, or this is a really good piece of audio that they gave me right here. But I mean, I think everybody would prefer to have somebody along with you because, it does take a lot. And it's just easier if you have, 2 hands, or if you have 4 hands versus 2.
So yeah, Eric asks, I've noticed less local news over the years, which is important for learning about the issues in our communities. Do you see local news making a comeback?
That's a great question, and yeah, he's right. So the thing with local news is some of them are family owned and some of them are like, by bigger companies, right? But with so many people turning to streaming and that kind of stuff, it makes it a little bit harder. So stations aren't necessarily going to have the same budget, and with the way that technology is always changing, like, used to back in the early 2000s, right? Having a multimedia journalist or multi-skilled journalist wasn't like the go-to, wasn't the norm. There was typically a position for everybody. You had a reporter who was just a reporter. You had, a cameraman who did the camera. You might have an editor to help you edit your story together. But with the way that technology is, like everything you can do, I've done a lot of stories with just my iPhone. I've shot
Wow.
some things that with just this, and they arguably look better than what I shot with the camera, because your phone is made for natural lighting, right? It has close to as many sensors in the eye as and so whenever you shoot with your phone, all the color looks better, um, and things are smoother because it's meant to be handheld, right?
Oh
Uh,
yeah.
and so, with the way that technology evolves, less and less are so many people needed in the production of things, which makes it more competitive, right? To get a spot into a station.
Yeah.
And so with local news, I mean, we've been hearing that it's dying for the last decade or so, right? And so my last 2 years of college, I was kind of like, well, I'm here now. So, but I really don't know. I mean, with the way that things are right now and so much, distrust and questioning of the media, especially at the national level, you know, we could be surprised, right? We could go back to seeing where a lot of local journalism is maybe what people need to feel like they can believe what they're seeing or not seeing in front of them. Um,
Right.
and also, with local news as opposed to national, you don't always have like that bias, right? Like people are interested in what's happening here, right? Like what's happening here in Southern Kentucky matters to the people here in Southern Kentucky. It doesn't matter to the people in Northern Ohio, right? Like, so with it being region specific, you do have that dedicated fan base. But at the same time, like I said, with the lack of employment um, opportunities, along with the rise of like streaming, I think it makes it hard for local news to break through to a lot of people.
So have news stations started shifting towards streaming, like becoming more online based?
Yeah, yeah. So my station and I think every station in the country has an app of some sort,
Yeah.
just about. And then also, people have some stations have like deals with actual streaming services. So like you can watch MS Now on Peacock TV, right? Um, my station had this thing called Me TV where you could stream on there. A lot of stations also do like live on Facebook or other sites that will allow you to go live, because some people don't have cable, right? So all they do is
Right.
Netflix or Hulu. And so yeah, there are a lot of stations that have like their own app and will stream on there because they know that people don't really have the same accessibility or attention span as they used to.
So how do leads typically come in for a story? Somebody just emails it to you or calls in, or like how do you
Yeah,
typically?
yeah. So those people that really care, right? That watch local news, and people that when I'm going to buy bananas at Walmart, they say, "Hey," I'm like, "That's me." Some people will call or email the station, but also a lot of our discovery comes from Facebook, right? Like I think whenever I was younger, of course, Facebook was coming out. I think when I was in maybe like middle school. And so everybody was on Facebook, and then it was like, Facebook's kind of for old people. Let's get on Twitter. And so
Yeah,
everybody went to Twitter.
it
But
switched.
yeah,
It switched up at a certain point.
yeah, but the old people still are on Facebook.
Oh
That-
yeah, 100%. Yeah,
So
100%.
what's cool about that is that, people that especially are older and established and know that, and also it's Facebook's easier to use, right? So, the entities that are older and established have Facebook pages, and they still use them to this day. So typically we use Facebook for a lot of our discovery, because the police department is going to post on Facebook. The fire department the schools are going to post on Facebook, right? And then sometimes, people share things or, repost things. And so eventually, and for me personally, my Facebook, I stopped using it after maybe like ninth grade. So whenever I got hired at the station, I just kind of reinvented my Facebook, and I went ahead and I just followed every major entity in my surrounding area. I followed all the public school systems and the city and the public school systems, both county and city. I'd follow fire departments, police departments, local nonprofits and charities. Of course, I'd follow, all the mayors on Facebook. And, so eventually the algorithm sees what I'm trying to do, and it's pushing me things that are, newsy. And so I would just get on
Right.
Facebook, scroll through for a couple hours and be like, oh, this is cool. Or, oh, this is happening next week. Maybe this is interesting to some people. And yeah, not too many tips flow through, but yes, the internet is definitely a great resource. Also, the local entities, they know that we have a news station, right? And so they will also email us too, like, like the local community college, they always email us and say, hey guys, we're having a signing ceremony for all of our graduating nursing class who have committed to a certain hospital in the area this year. Please come on by. Or, the fire department will send out updates, that kind of thing. But yeah, it's mostly Facebook, surprisingly.
Oh wow. So like obviously since you're in media on television, you have to kind of go by the ratings to a certain extent. And you kind of mentioned people are really interested in like crime, probably like daily events. But how much does that really affect like the stories, the kind of stories you report on and how you report them?
Um, well, I guess I would say when it comes to like metrics and stuff, just being a reporter, I'm not really aware of that, right? Like, the news director and the general manager, they look at all that stuff. Because
Right.
also news is still a business, right? Like there has to be money made, which is why every station has a sales team, right? Who sells airtime for advertisements. So, when you learn every news station is its own thing, right? Like it's all separate. You walk somewhere, it's not the same as somewhere else. So, I can't speak for everybody as far as how hard they hold on to like the demographic, right? But like with our demographic, I know that it's middle-aged Caucasian people, so like 40, I would say it was like 40 to 60, and it's mostly right-leaning or Republican. And so, sometimes there would be instances where our news director was like, we have to be careful how we approach this because most people that watch us, are older white, Republican men. And so,
Right.
you have to be careful of how you're framing it because you don't want it to seem as if you're playing one side or the other. Well, that's the hard thing also about being in the media, right? Is that you're supposed to be non-biased and you're
Yeah.
supposed to present it as straight as you can without looking like you're taking a side. Well, a lot of people will think, well, why are they covering that? Oh, they must be they're going woke, or oh, that's pretty liberal of them, you know. And then you'll cover something, that's right leaning, and they'll, then the community reacts to it, and they'll say something like, "Oh, well, I didn't know that they were going MAGA," and it's like we're not going like nothing's happening here. This is just an event that is happening in the community, and we're doing our job as a news agency to let you know about it. You know what I mean? And so you never want to try to push an agenda or frame something a certain way. Now, with being a smaller station, you do have more autonomy with the reporters. Our news director always pushes us to say, hey, go do what you want to do, right? And so that's the point of having a morning meeting every morning. We do our discovery, we pitch to everybody, and then the director typically kind of says yay or nay on the idea, but it's usually more yays than nay, because in my experience, the news director that I had, he was really big on creativity and feeling like because he always said it's not going to be as good if it's not something you care about, and you can still make something look pretty good even if you don't care about it, but
Right.
you can tell, and he can tell, and sometimes the viewer can tell, oh, he didn't give a shit about this one, and I can tell by the way that
Yeah.
it's put together, it looks kind of sloppy, or I can tell by the voice track, it doesn't sound, very interested in how he's recording it, that kind of thing.
Me and Kev have talked about that a little bit in terms of, people in the press or the media where someone like, let's say, David Letterman. Is one thing I noticed about, I was watching, he has a new show on Netflix. I think it's called Our Next Guest Is.
Yeah.
And I was watching it just, with the lens, with an eye for, what does this look like from the media perspective? I noticed that he's very concerned, very interested in each guest. And it doesn't matter who it is, you can genuinely feel that he's interested in the guest. And I think, that's probably like you're saying, like sometimes the audience can tell, oh, this guy's, he's just reporting on this. He's not really into it.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and and you kind of want to give that, and even if you don't, like, everybody and everything, whether it's software development, right, or whatever else it is that you're doing, you're performing, right? When you have to interact with other people, you're performing. And so, and with also being broadcast on television, that's definitely a performance, right? And you have to act like, I guess I'll pull the curtain back. You have to act like you care, right? Or don't care, depending on what the story is like. If it's sad, you should sound sad, right? We had one reporter that, and he anchors every now and then, and he just has the hardest time emoting, right? Like every story reads the same, right? And
Yeah.
if you have deadly car crash kills 5 in Barron County, you should sound even though you don't know those people, you should sound
Yeah.
concerned, because generally speaking, it is sad. And somebody out there, being that we're a local station, somebody out there knows that those people that
They
died.
know who it is. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So yeah, in terms of like just being a professional, let's just say somebody new came on the job, you were there to mentor them. Like, what would you recommend to them for them to really appear on camera, like like a seasoned vet? Like, how would you guide and mold them?
Appearing on camera as a seasoned vet, you have to be one, right? You either have it or you don't.
There's no shortcuts.
Yeah. You either have so, well, my general manager, she told me when you're on the desk, because I started off as I was anchoring for a while to cover the main anchor's maternity leave the first year that I got hired. So I was anchoring, reporting, and I hadn't graduated yet. So that 6 months was or 4 to 6 months was kind of rough for me, that first 4 to 6 months. But she had told me, whenever you are anchoring and you're reading a story, act like the person that you just admired most in the world is sitting across from you, and you're talking to them, because the camera's there. You're looking at the camera at the teleprompter, reading the words, but And she said, she said, do you have a celebrity you really like? And I said, I love Drake. And she said, okay, act like Drake is standing right there. You're telling Drake what's happening. You have to act like you care. Make it interesting to Drake. And I was like, I can do that. And that helped me a lot, right? Visualizing it definitely does something, but it's one of those things. So the degree I had at my university is in the Potter College of Arts and Letters, right? So my degree is technically like an art degree looked at by the university, and it is right
Okay.
there. There's an art to it. You're creating every day, right? You're working the skill of interviewing people, right? How to read people, how to read the room. You do you take courses on video editing and audio editing, and it is an art, right? Like especially if you're a professional podcaster, figuring out camera settings, all that kind of stuff. There's some finesse to it, right? So same thing with like drawing, or painting, whatever. You just have to do it to get good at it, right? Some people are just born with that innate ability to be
Right.
creative. I think I have a little bit of that, but of course, it's not lost on me that the more you do it, the easier it will get, right? The first time that I was live on TV, I wasn't so nervous that like you could see me shaking, but like, my hands were definitely that I had my hands down the whole time
Yeah, right.
holding them, but my hands were definitely, doing a little bit of this. But
Yeah.
after, 6 months, I got to where I was complaining. I was like, dude, I don't want to do this damn live shot, putting the mic on, tie my tie, the camera, they say cute, and live here from Broadway on Bowling Green. We just had a murder, blah 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 blah. You just kind of turn it on and turn it off, and you get impressed with yourself, right? Because now it doesn't seem hard. It doesn't seem like I'm working, right? You kind of jump into it. So I would just tell someone who's starting out, hey, just breathe, go slow, right? Because also the faster you talk, the more you have to say, because you have to fill time. So I told our new weather anchor that was starting out, he would be going through the forecast and he's fumbling, and I said, hey man, I said, pro tip, because the weather has to be like around 3 minutes for the full weather, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Because the show was timed at like, right at like 28 minutes for commercial break. I mean, it's very meticulous. And so I came in one day and I told him, I said, listen, I said, you're doing great, right? Like, you're going to school for meteorology, your stuff, you're saying all the right words and everything, but we can hear that you're nervous, right? We can hear you swallowing and
Yeah.
stuttering, etc. I said, you have to fill 3 minutes, right? Which means the faster you talk, the more words you have to say. So just slow down, kind of draw out your forecast, right? That way it's not as hard for you, when you're actually in it. Yeah, you just have to slow down, be very intentional with your speech. I think when you're on camera, you end up feeling a lot more comfortable. And also, when it comes to something like reporting, and looking for interviews and that kind of thing, I told a new girl that had started, before I left, I said, biggest piece of advice I can give you is that everybody is the same. They just work different jobs. No one's more important or less important, right? So if you're scared to ask the mayor for an interview, you shouldn't be scared, because he's a regular guy, right? He's like, you can walk up to the mayor in the bar, shake his hand, and he's a regular guy. He just runs the city. But that doesn't
Right.
make him any, he's not an egomaniac or any, then the worst people can do is just say no, like I don't have time. But you should never be nervous to ask for an interview, because people are still people. They just they have a job they have to do. And part of their job, especially if you're in public service, is to grant the media interviews. So they're already on
Oh,
your team
right.
as it is,
You know, a lot of times when people are in the process of asking for something, let's just say like an interview, for example, you sometimes you shouldn't just be upfront and direct, or are you immediately direct? Like, what is your approach?
Well, it depends.
Mm.
So like I said, if it's with a public servant, I'm going to ask, because it is your responsibility and duty to the public to disperse information. I am a disperser of information. So
Yeah, right.
you should want to talk to me as fast as you can to make sure that you control the narrative, right? because the last thing that anybody wants in a small town is for Facebook to start cooking up some bullshit theory about how, that the police department is secretly funneling money to pay for all these new raises for the officers, or why is the chief driving a Bugatti? I thought that everybody in Bowling Green was upper middle class, and it seems like he's rich. So it just depends, and also on temperament. There's some people that, even though I remember one time something happened, or I was doing a story on being a first responder during the holidays. Obviously, people that are EMTs, firefighters, and police officers, they miss a lot of holidays. They miss a lot of birthdays,
Sure.
And so I wanted to do something on, first responders working, on Thanksgiving and Christmas. And so I'm just thinking of all the sheriff's offices and police departments I can call, and just saying to whoever is taking information, I say, hey, I want to do a story about, what it's like working on the holidays as a law enforcement officer. Could you get back to me with somebody? And I'll leave my number, my name, and then
Okay.
the sheriff will call me back, right? Well, one time I reached out to the sheriff of a county in my viewing area, and we got on Zoom. And when we got on Zoom, he said, hey, man, can you do me a favor? I said, yeah, what's up? He said, I'm not trying to be mean or nothing, but after we do this interview, can you delete my number? Because I have a small department. I don't always have time to answer the phone every time a cat gets stuck in a tree. And I was like, yeah, sheriff, sure, whatever you say. And after that, I didn't. I think I don't think I ever saved his number to begin with, but after that, I didn't talk to him anymore because he told me he didn't want to talk, and the only thing that's going to do is make my job harder, make him not like me whenever I actually do need something. So I was like, okay, you don't want, Well, I told my news director about it, and she said, well, he shouldn't have said that. It's his job he's the sheriff. It's his job to reach out to the media and let us know that everything in Simpson County is okay. Right.
You would think. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, I told that story a couple of times, and people said, oh, well, he's just being lazy. That's not right. And I'm like, right. Yeah. But, so everybody's temperament's different too. Like, you would think even with your position, people act the way they act, so.
Right.
So I know you can't always report on positive news. So let's just say you have to report on some negative news on the police department. How do you maintain like enough goodwill with the police department to get stories going forward when you have to report that negative news?
Well, I think that comes from just being honest, right?
Right.
I'm going to get paid regardless of what is happening, right? Regardless of if the mayor is embezzling money from the city or not, or either that or a little girl, is starting a nonprofit by selling lemonade at her lemonade. Whatever it is, I'm getting paid anyway. So approaching it with honesty and clear intentions is the best way to start out. So if you have a negative story, obviously something that someone doesn't want to talk about, in my case, I just try to be as neutral as possible. I have to acknowledge that it's not the best situation, but it is something people are interested in, and luckily for me, I haven't had any situations where like it was something serious and I had to be like, I really hate to make this phone call to this person because
Yeah.
but there has been a couple of times like that. I remember one time I called someone. He's a public official, elected public official, and I called him and I said, hey, buddy, I said, I really hate to ask you about this because I know that you kind of want the situation to be over, but I'm just going to go ahead and ask you, do you want to offer a comment on, blah, blah, blah. And he told me, no, I really don't have much to say. And also, my lawyer told me not to say anything,
Right.
right now until we get this settled. And I was like, okay, that's fine, you know. But you know, if you make enemies to begin with, or you know, you make somebody think the story's going to be one thing and you end up airing another, you know, people remember that kind of thing, right? And so
Oh, yeah.
you have to be, you just have to do your best to always just be kind and honest all the time, right? And they'll realize that even when it is something bad, they're going to be like, oh well, I'm sure Caleb's going to call me soon, you know, because they know that it's bad. They know that this is something that the news will be interested in, and they know that,
Yeah.
you know, me personally, I've never made a bad story. I've never made a story that made you guys look bad, right? So it kind of softens the blow when something bad does happen, is your relationship to begin with.
But so you're kind of like, you're keeping it 100 basically with
Yeah,
the audience,
yeah,
really
yeah.
trying to be forthcoming and straightforward, not like shifty or splitting hairs or whatever.
Right. Yeah. Because a lot of people, you know, since I would say since probably the early 2000s, right? There's been slowly a slow decline of distrust in media, right? You
Big
know, the
time.
more things that happen, the more government cover-ups, the more, you know, people are like, oh, they're just lying anyway. But that's the beauty of local news, because I have nothing to gain from lying about anything, right? I just want to let you guys know what's happening in the next town over 20 minutes. You know, there's really,
Right.
it's hard to set an agenda, right? As a local reporter.
So yeah, you kind of mentioned, like as an example, the mayor embezzling money. So like, let's just say, how would that story realistically come in? Like somebody would drop a tip through the phone or through
Yeah.
email.
Yeah. So unless it's a big, you know, cover up, right? Somebody maybe in City Hall would notice, like, hey, we're kind of coming up short a lot, or you know, on different things, or you know, we appropriated some money for this, but it seems to have gone to this instead. You know, and so in a situation like that, um, you know, more than likely, you would have a whistleblower of some sort, right? You know, because the mayor's not gonna just turn himself in suddenly, right? Or unless he just is feeling really guilty.
Right.
But yeah, more than likely, I mean, I would assume it could be, and it could be anything, right? It could be, someone that the station has a relationship with as like an attorney, right? Like for all of our legal stories, we ask this one person, right? And then while you're
Right.
talking to that one person, they say, "Hey, I shouldn't be telling you this, but Mayor XYZ came to me um, yesterday, and he said that he might be in some sort of trouble and need me for something soon." And then you say, "Oh my gosh, what's happening?" And then the attorney says, "Well, apparently he's been spending money on things he shouldn't be." And that's all I'm going to say. And then you're like, "Oh wow. Okay." So then you start doing your follow-up, right? And you
Yeah.
know, you have that, you know, people always say, you know, you're supposed to keep your sources confidential. Well, that's important because, you know, again, the news is it's all word. I mean, in a way, you know, you can consider it gossip. You can consider, you know, what, you know, but at the end of the day, it's people talking to each other, right? And so,
100%. Yeah.
yeah, and so, you know, when you make friends, they're going to tell you stuff, right? Now you know, if someone says, "Hey, how do you know that?" You say, "Well, I can't tell you that," right? Or they don't want me to say who it is just yet, right? Or you know, that kind of thing. Um, you know, so it could be anything. It could be the city accountant, you know, decides to confront the mayor, and you know, then they report it, you know, to the police or whatever, and then you know, of course, they don't want it to get out, but it's gonna get out, right? And then you know,
Yeah. Right.
we have to ask about it. So it could be a variety of things. It could be someone, you know, it could be an accident, you know, like with that whole cave flooding issue that I covered last year. I was talking to the city's public works director, and I just was talking to him about something unrelated. And then, he answered my question. And then I said, is there anything else going on that, you think would be interesting in the next few days to cover? And then he just briefly mentioned it. I went to the city hall meeting, and then ended up being a 2-hour meeting. And I was like, oh, I didn't know it was going to be this big of a thing, right? So sometimes you just stumble upon things on accident. But yeah, most of the time that we get any information, it's because it was sent out in some sort of email, or someone tipped us off on the right direction to look.
Right.
Oh, wow. So, yeah, you also mentioned that you're doing some substitute teaching. So, can you tell us a little bit about that? How did you make that pivot into that?
Sure. Yeah. So I left my station in September. I wasn't interested in re-signing, and but I knew that I wanted to pursue another media job. The thing about being in the news is that it's a lifestyle, right? It's not just a job; it's a lifestyle.
Yeah.
Some days, I would start working at 6, right? Like if I'm doing something with the police chief, I would say, Chief, what time do you get there, so I can get done with my day faster? I'll say, what time do you get there? And he says, oh, I get there at 6:30. I say, okay, I'll see you at 6:30. And then, it depends on what time, what stories are happening and when people are available. The thing about the news is that it's retroactive, right? It's not typically a whole lot of proactivity going on. So sometimes I would go to work at 6 and leave at 3. Sometimes I go to work at 9 and then I wouldn't leave until 9, right?
Wow.
And so the whole up and down, it's hard to deal with. And so whenever I had my opportunity to just leave the station and kind of make a little bit of a lifestyle change, I took it. And I was like, I'm not in a rush to get back into the news. I will pursue some stuff after a couple months, but it'd be nice to have a little bit of a brain break, right? Well, my grandmother, she's been a teacher. She was a full-time teacher for like 30, 35 years. And then she's been a substitute for the past 15, I think. And when I told her that I wasn't going to resign, she said, well, in the meantime, why don't you just substitute for the county? And I was like, you know what, that's a good idea, because there's been a teacher shortage for like the last 3 years, right, at least. And I was like, that's a good idea. So I signed up to be a substitute, or I applied with the county. And, I'd done a lot of education stories too, about how, literacy rates are down. There's really no civic engagement. A lot of kids don't know that. A lot of kids can't name all 3 branches of federal government. Penmanship is terrible. I've done all these educational stories, and I was like, it would be cool to see if it is really as bad as they tell us it is. And then also it's something that still is impactful, right? Because I didn't want to be bored, right? Being on TV every day and then switching to, being, locked in an office or just doing retail. I wasn't really interested in doing that. And so I wanted to do something that was still kind of important. So I decided to do that. And it's been a lot of fun. And what I will say is that everything that you're seeing on the national news and from people on TikTok voicing their concerns is true. Kids don't have the comprehension skills that the 3 of us have. The kids now, they can't,
So can you speak to that a little more? Like what kind of level are these kids at right now?
Yeah. So I would assume that some kids are probably, I would say probably a good percentage of kids, maybe 10 to 15% are 2 grades behind.
Wow. And how long has it been like that?
Since COVID, I mean, the COVID really exacerbated the issues, right? Because, people were stuck inside, had a lot of screen time, and being that, and education isn't modeled the same way as even when we were kids, right? I'm 28. So even just 10 years ago, or even just 10 years ago, 10 to 13 years ago, whenever I was going through high school, we still, for the most part, had textbooks, and, we were expected to write things. Everything now is online. literally everything. And so, not only when you're teaching to help the kids ace a test to give the school money for the next year, you're also doing everything on a Chromebook or some sort of laptop.
Right.
So you don't have the same type of dexterity in your hand to write. You don't have the same fine motor skills. Your eyes are going to deteriorate more quickly because everybody's staring at a screen for 8 hours a day. And you don't have the time to work one-on-one with the student, right? You have to keep pushing through to get ready for the test, because the test is coming this spring, whether you want it to or not, right? I have to make sure that everything that's going to be on this test. Not that people aren't being taught, or kids aren't being taught from the position of, I have to make sure that you know everything that you need to know for when you graduate. So, there was one kid, he asked me, he said, "Mr. Ridgeway, can you help me with my social studies homework?" I said, "Yes." I said, "Yeah, man, what is it?" He said, "It's about the Federalist Papers. You know what that is?" And I said, "I know that there's a thing called the Federalist Papers. It's been a long time since I've read anything about it, but yeah, I know." And so, I was helping him go through it, and I was kind of picking it up pretty quickly. Like, even though this is my first time reading it in like 12 years, I was, because I have the comprehension skills, I have the context,
Right.
I can exercise context clues.
Critical thinking, right?
Yeah, but we're reading this passage, and I said, "Okay, read this first sentence to me." And he reads it, and I say, "Okay, what does that mean?" And he kind of repeats the sentence back to me. And I'm like, yes, I can read too. I know that's what it says, but what does it mean?
Right.
And he's like, "I don't know." And I'm like,
Wow.
and he was in 8th grade, and before that, they were taking a test, of course, on their computer. There was another teacher in there that was helping me proctor the exam. And some of the kids, it had been 40 minutes of the class, and they're on question 30.
Yeah.
100 question quiz. And, and it's adaptive. It helps figure out how to place them for next year. And I said, "Miss Brown, I'm not trying to be funny, but I feel like my class would have already been done, And she said, "Yeah, it really scares me when I look at these kids, because I know my 12-year-old granddaughter would probably already be done or close to being done, And she said, now maybe it's different because both of her parents are teachers, but
Yeah.
the way that the kids are taught now, it's just way different than whenever you were in school, and definitely different than whenever I was in school." And I was like, that is just so sad. And I couldn't imagine being like a career teacher, noticing over like 20 years how much kids have kind of regressed toward the end, when you
Wow.
think people should be improving. This is now actually is the first time in U.S. history that kids now are performing academically worse than their previous generations. Typically, every generation has become more educated and been able to perform better academically. But now,
Yeah.
in the last like 5 years, I would say, the data is coming out that the kids now are not as smart as the kids as I would have been at their
Oh, I
age.
believe it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it brings me back. I just turned 39. Kev, you're what, 41?
Yeah.
Something like that. Yeah. I mean, like, when we were in school, there were no cell phones.
Yeah.
Even in grade school, or even in high school, I didn't get a cell phone until junior year, and it was one of those big ones, the flip open ones. And it was extremely expensive to use. And my mom would say, only turn this on and use it if you miss your bus and you need us to come get you, because it's like, I don't know, $1 a minute, or really
Mhm.
expensive. So you look at that, and now you look at these kids, they grow up with tablets and laptops and all
Yeah.
this stuff. When I was really young, there wasn't even the internet. So it's just a whole different, I guess I'm trying to
Mhm.
get at, it's like, it's a whole different landscape right now. So what you're telling me isn't really that surprising.
Right, for sure. And like with like my generation, a lot of people were getting phones in middle school. Facebook was just coming out, right? And then Twitter came out. We had just left MySpace. And smartphones were just starting to be a thing. Like, my generation was the first ones to grow, like to get the internet and grow up with the internet. You know what I mean? Like, and so like Instagram came out like what, freshman or sophomore year of high school. I remember getting it. I've had Snapchat since it came out in 2012. Like it, it's cool to see the matriculation of it, but also because of that, I think my generation's in a cool liminal space where we have like the best of both worlds, but we're not.
Yeah.
We don't have TikTok brain. That's what I tell the kids. You have TikTok
brain. Yeah.
You can't hold on to an idea that I gave you 5 minutes.
Scroll. That's what we're looking at right now.
Yeah, and when you're constantly getting new information, your brain can only hold so much. So when you're getting new information, it's pushing things out. It's constantly pushing things out the more that you're taking in, right? And yeah, the kids they're just worse off for it. They really are. And parenting,
it's terrible.
Yeah, and parenting isn't the same either, right? Because you have to think the people that were my age that were not performing well in school and didn't really care about anything, well, now they are of the age to start having children, right? So now you have, people starting families. Well, they didn't really have the best foundation themselves. And now that they have kids, what do? They just, they give them tablets. They don't, they don't parent them in the direction that they should be going to perform well in school, and et cetera, et cetera. Whenever we were little, learning didn't stop just when you walked out of the school building. You still learned it. You still did homework. Kids now don't even really have homework.
Really?
It's very rare. I remember.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, I remember one time I was substituting in a 4th grade classroom, and I told them, I said, no, or was it 4th or was it? I think it was 4th. I said, okay, guys, after you finish your assignment, I need you to pull out a piece of paper and I want you to write me a 3-paragraph essay. And they all just went off. They were like, are you serious? And I was like, wow, TikTok wasn't kidding. I was like, yes, 3 paragraphs. And they were like, can we do 2? And I was like, no, you have to do 3.
Wow.
And I want you to make 3 full paragraphs. And I said, you guys know how many sentences is in a paragraph? And they said 3. And I said, what's 3 to 5? But because I'm only asking you to write 3 paragraphs, I want 5 sentences to make a full paragraph. Right. So I said, guys, that's only 15 sentences. And then some kids were like, Mr. Ridgeway, can we type it? No, I want you to take a pencil. I want you to write it, dude.
Let me see it written out. Yeah.
Yeah. And then I had kids coming up to me, bringing me 2-sentence paragraphs. And I'm like, girl,
did you hear what I just said? Yeah.
Yeah. There was in an 8th grade class right before Christmas break started. We read a short story called The Gift of the Magi. You guys remember that story? It's about a husband and a wife and they're poor around Christmas time.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So, the wife, she cuts her hair to get her husband a chain for his watch. And then he sells his watch to get her some combs for her hair. The irony is they both give up what they got their present, Well, I had asked, I said, what class were they in? The Youngs, what class were they in? This kid stands up and he says, oh, they were in kindergarten. 8th grade. We just read the story inside. I made the class be quiet and read the story. I read it for the first time in a long time, right? The first time I saw it was in middle school. That's the last time I ever read it. So this is my first time reading it again along with them. I could remember the whole thing, right? And I said, Mason, no, they are not in kindergarten. I get what Young's kindergarten. I get it, right? We're in school. I understand the pieces you're putting together, but no, obviously I'm referring to the story. I say, Mason, no. I said, what class were they in? And he goes, class of 2026. And I went black for a second. And I said, Mason, I said, no. And I went over to the table that was in front of him and I shook it. I was like, Mason, I was like, no, you got to be kidding me. And this kid next to me, he goes, they were peasants. And I said, it's not 1410. They're not peasants. I said, yeah, low class. They're poor, I said, Mason, social class. And he was like, oh yeah, I knew that. And then I said to myself, I said, well, did you? I don't know if you
Did
did.
you really though?
You
Yeah.
know, why would I be asking about kindergartners? We just read the story about a married couple who's broke at Christmas time. You know, it
Wow.
they don't have the comprehension. And then they asked me, they said,
It's
well,
really
Mr. Ridgeway,
sad.
when's the last time you read? You know everything. Today's my first day reading it in a decade, man. I promise you. You know, I have something you don't, you know, because we've kind of forced it out of you. We've given you the tools that kind of render this useless, right? You know, this is a muscle too. If you're not exercising this, it's gonna same thing as when you're not, you know, practicing your free throws, right? You're not
Yeah,
gonna.
and you know what? It's just going to get worse and worse because of AI. You know,
Yeah,
let's say, you know, little Jimmy has a book report on Huck Finn. They say, okay, we need, you know, 4-page book report, have an introduction, have a conclusion. You can just go onto Chat GPT or Gemini and say, hey, you know, give me a 4-page story about X, Y, and Z. And it'll spit that thing out to you probably within seconds or minutes. I don't know.
yeah,
And then you just bring that in and you hand that in as your work.
yeah,
And what did
and
you learn? I mean, you
yeah,
learned how to prompt the AI, but
right,
that's kind of like where that ends.
yeah. And that's the thing. That's what I told one of my classes too. I said, guys, you're not doing yourself any favors by cheating or using AI because all you're doing is you're letting the computer answer. You're not answering for yourself. So whenever you do get into a situation, God forbid it's something semi-serious, and maybe your phone is dead or maybe the Wi-Fi is off right now and you can't look it up. I mean, isn't that just so sad that you wouldn't be able to figure out how to do whatever it is you need to do because you just don't have the ability to put the brain power toward it because you've kind of aged yourself out of it because you keep using Snapchat AI and Chat GPT. You know,
Yeah.
I told my 8th grade class before the break, I said, guys, I said, you know, you guys are gonna be in high school next year. And that 4 years is gonna fly by. So for these 2 days that we're together, I'm gonna treat you guys like adults, right?
Hmm.
Well, one of them asked me, Mr. Ridgeway, does anything that we learn in school really matter? Like, am I going to use any of this stuff? And I said, no. And they start laughing. They're like, oh, he said no. And I was like, I mean, I wouldn't kid. I told you guys I was going to treat you like adults when I come in here because you are almost 18. You're going to be 18 in 4 years, most of
4 years. Yeah.
or 4 or 5, you know. Eventually, you're going to be able to, you know, get eventually you're going to be able to get arrested and you know you'll be able to buy a gun. You're going to be able to buy cigarettes. You know, there's no point in me lying. It's not going to help you any, right? And I said, no, you're not going to. I said, I haven't used the Pythagorean theorem since 11th grade. But what school does teach you that you use the rest of your life is perseverance, problem solving, sense of responsibility and structure and time management, things that you're going to use for the rest of your life, right? Like what you're doing on the science assignment does not matter, but the fact that you are able to finish it
Yeah.
in the allotted time, right, and turn it in, that is something that's important, right? You have to be able to pay your bills on time. You have to be
It's
able
a
to follow
skill.
directions at work, right? So you can keep making money, so you're not homeless. You know, these things matter. These are building blocks for how you live a successful life. It's not about the material. It's about the skill and the execution of it, right?
Wow. That's really eye opening.
But hey,
Yeah.
guys, we're at the top of the hour, man. We definitely need to have you back so we can really dive into this because you know the
Oh yeah,
future.
of course. You know, this was great. Yeah, I mean, you know, there's so many things about the education system that really are driving the wedge between success and failure. I mean, like I think we really are at a critical mass kind of point. We're at a big
Yeah.
tipping point, and you know, it being an being a supplemental educator now after coming out of the news cycle and then looking to get back into it, it's kind of changed my perspective because it's made me realize, like, you know, like, for instance, the Secretary of State for Kentucky, he is pushing forth this new legislation. It hasn't passed yet, but he's trying to get something passed to where, as a high school senior, you have to be able to pass a civics class, like get a B at least, pass civics before you can graduate. Because these are going to be people that are going out and voting and buying firearms, and they're going to be the new adults. You need to kind of know how things work before you just get out there. And so it's a very interesting time for sure, man, with the way that the political landscape is right now, and then how technology is evolving. I think we're in for a wild ride for sure the next few years.
Yeah. Before we close it out, where can our audience find you at?
Oh, well, I guess if you wanted to see anything that I've done as far as news goes, you can check me out on my YouTube channel. That is Original TV. I spelled it ORIDGEENAL TV, because it's kind of like a play on words with my last name. My last name's Ridgeway, so it's Original TV. But yeah, you can find me on there on YouTube, and you can look at some of the things I've done. The protest, some of my public works stories. But yeah, man, I'm just a regular guy, just trying to do my best to make the world better, one news story and one kid at a time. So
awesome, man! It's absolute
very
pleasure.
eye-opening stuff.
Absolute pleasure having you on. We'll get you back, and we'd like to thank everybody for tuning in. We'll catch y'all next time.
all right,
See you guys.